The next kingdom that we deal with is kingdom fungi, the third one. We had talked about Monera, we had talked about Protista. Now we are going to talk about kingdom fungi. Now when we talk about kingdom fungi, we have to get introduced to a term known as saprophytic nutrition. If you know it, that is very good. If you don't know it, then also it's not much of a problem, because we are going to understand what it is. We had talked about autotrophic nutrition. Auto means self, okay, and that type of nutrition was basically the plant or the organism was making its own food. It was not dependent on any other food source. In the case of heterotrophic nutrition, we talked that whatever food is synthesized by the autotrophs becomes food for somebody else, and that is autotrophic nutrition. You read about it in great depth when you understand ecological systems, but for now what you have to remember is that in the heterotrophic nutrition, one is holozoic nutrition and other type is saprophytic nutrition. Now what is this holozoic nutrition? This holozoic nutrition is the type of nutrition where the organism engulfs the food particle, as in our own case. How do we consume food? We just take that food bolus and that is ingested by us through our mouth. That is holozoic nutrition. Now in certain cases when you are hospitalized, you don't eat food, what happens is that you are given a syringe inside your body and that fills your body with glucose, as we call it in the simplest terms, that the person was hospitalized and glucose was given intravenously to him or her. Now that is also sort of nutrition only. Now compare it to the saprophytic nutrition if you can. Here also the organism has some sort of syringe inserted inside the food source, and instead of ingesting that food source directly into their body, they just take the nutrition, as if they are having some straw inside that food and they are taking the nutrition. Now to put it into simpler terms, I would say that the digestion of the food is taking outside the body, and then whatever nutrients are to be taken, they are ingested. Okay. Now this is opposite to our case. First of all, we consume the food, then we chew it, then it goes inside our body. Then what happens? Then its digestion takes place in the small intestine, that digestion which has taken place, and as a result the nutrients which are released, agitated out of that food material, they are absorbed. Okay. In the case of saprophytic nutrition that we find in fungi, we do not have such mechanism. What we have instead is that the digestion has taken place outside the body only. And you know that what is responsible for digestion? It is the enzymes or the proteins which are present inside the body. So whatever enzymes are necessary for digestion, they would be thrown out directly on the food. From that food, the nutrients would be ingested, and that is known as saprophytic nutrition. And when we talk about kingdom fungi, we are dealing with the saprophytes. All the fungi, or what we call as fungus, they are going to have saprophytic nutrition. They are going to feed on dead and decaying matter. And how do they feed on dead and decaying matter? They just don't ingest it, they digest it and take up the nutrients. What you see over here is these are the mushrooms, and if you have ever noticed that in the rainy season, monsoons, there is abundant growth of these mushrooms all around you, especially in the bark of the trees or somewhere in the garden. You would go, if it is natural enough, you would find these abundant mushrooms growing over there, and that is because at that time there is lot of moisture around the living content, and as bark is living, so it is having some sort of nutrient inside it. These fungi, they grow abundantly and they keep on doing their saprophytic nutrition and they survive. So what we are going to deal with in this kingdom is that there are organisms which are till now we had discussed about unicellular organisms. Now when I say these are the organisms which are, they are multicellular. So we are going to deal with organisms which are either multicellular, or certain examples could be unicellular as well, as we have the example of yeast. Yeast is a unicellular fungus. Okay. So that could be classified into Protista as well, it could be classified in kingdom fungi as well, and you know yeast is an organism which is of great importance to the economic industries like alcohol industry, like food and beverages industry is greatly dependent on yeast for all the fermentation. So we see that this kingdom is having economic importance as well. Now the first thing that you see in kingdom fungi is this thing you must have observed somewhere or else when you happen to destroy the food, when the food gets rotten, somewhere on your bread you would have seen the bread mold, that is rhizopus. Now this is what? This is Penicillium and Aspergillus. These are the two examples we are going to discuss. Now, have you heard about penicillium? If not, you might have heard about penicillin at least. Penicillin, if not in science, you might have heard about in general knowledge that this was the first antibiotic that was to be coined out. Now, this penicillin is an antibiotic which is derived from a fungi known as Penicillium. Okay. And over here what we see is penicillium. Now what you see, this powdery sort of appearance, these are so many penicillium, these organisms are Penicillium and Aspergillus. Now what we have to see in this is, first of all we have Aspergillus. Now that powdery appearance was due to this particular part. This is something which is observed under the microscope. These are the fungal hyphae and these are the small fruiting bodies that give that powdery appearance. You just have to remember the name and keep a picture in the mind that this is what Aspergillus is. Then we have another example that is of Penicillium. What you see over here, this is also an microscopic image that you find over here. These branches, these are fungal hyphae, and again we have conidiophores, a difficult name, but do keep in mind that these are also the reproductive part. That is why the fungi spreads and spreads and spread, more and more spreading takes place. And then we have the most common one, that is Agaricus. Now this is the mushroom that you must have seen. They are edible as well. Now these are the fungal hyphae arranged in a very particular pattern, and these are known as gills because they look like somewhat like gills. And this is the top of the fungi, that is the head as we call it. This is the base. They are embedded in the soil. In the soil they have many branches which are known as fungal hypha. Now this part you have to remember that fungal body has fungal hypha. If I talk about protistans, I would say that they have a cell. If I talk about hypha, it would be a filamentous body. Okay. So what we have to remember in kingdom fungi is that they are saprophytic in nature. They are multicellular or they could be unicellular, as in the case of yeast. The nutrition is not holozoic, it was for the purpose of understanding. They are saprophytic. Then we have the example of Penicillium, then we have the example of Aspergillus. We have to remember that the organism is going to have fungal hyphae, which is a filamentous form of body. Okay, ribbon like if I talk about a cell, I usually draw it like this. You would also draw it like this, you would have a nucleus. But in the case of fungal hyphae, it is going to be a filamentous body inside which the nuclei could be present, and that is known as fungal hypha. Another point to be remembered is that the cell wall comprises of a complex carbohydrate known as chitin. This is to be remembered. By heart you have to cram it, that the cell wall of the filamentous hypha is made up of a complex carbohydrate which is known as chitin. So this was all about kingdom fungi, the few points you have to remember. Picture illustration is for the purpose of understanding the example so that they stay in your mind, you can remember them, and this is what we have in kingdom fungi.